Chapter 9:14. Some people were happy, while others were unhappy. While these people were drinking and singing, Yu Qianqiu, who had been chased out in humiliation, was rushing out of the Paradise Immortal Realm. His heart was cold. He wanted to leave the Paradise Immortal Realm as soon as possible. If anything happened, it would not be convenient to make a move in the Paradise Immortal Realm. However, the accident he had guessed still happened. Yu Qianqiu, who was flying at high speed, suddenly heard a cold snort. He turned his head, and was shocked to see that Songyan Xian had caught up to him, and was flying not far away from him. Yu Qianqiu had thought that he would come, but he did not expect him to come so soon. "Why are you so flustered? Are you afraid now?" Songyan Xian sneered. Yu Qianqiu immediately sneered. "Old dog, do you think I need to be afraid of you now? Even if I gave you 100 guts, you wouldn't dare to make a move here." These words made Songyan Xian somewhat angry. However, after looking around, he really did not dare to make a move here. His expression twisted as he gritted his teeth and said, "You have a sharp tongue. Later, I'll let you know what it means to beg for death." Yu Qianqiu looked at him disdainfully and said, "Threatening me? Do you believe that I'll make you beg for death right now?" "You." Songyan Xian put on a fake smile and said, a toad yawning, "You sure have a big tone." "Hee. Not only do I have a big tone, I also have big guts. Do you want to give it a try?" Yu Qianqiu flicked his sleeves, and over 100 azure flame flying swords flew out of his sleeves, circling around him as he flew. Songyan Xian's pupils shrank, and he said in a low voice, "You dare to make a move here?" Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly and said, "You think I don't dare? This old man's life is worthless, and I'll die if I go out anyway. Rather than that, I might as well fight it out with you here. Everyone knows that you're here to kill me anyway, so it's only natural for you to make a move against me, regardless of whether I made a move first or not. As long as you break the rules of the Paradise Immortal Realm, don't think about having a good life. Hee. Even if I were to shout for help right now, I could still make you suffer the consequences. To be able to drag you, an expert from the Heartless Palace, down with me, I won't die in vain. It's worth it." Grey Cloud Xian's expression changed, and his face twitched. He didn't expect this guy to be so shameless, and actually use this move to threaten him. However, he had no choice but to believe it. Think about it. A person who had been forced into a desperate situation. What else would he not dare to do? Using his precious life to gamble for Yu Qianqiu's lowly life was not worth it. "Old dog, I'm warning you. If I can still see you within a kilometer of me within the count of 3, don't blame me for hunting you down in the Paradise Immortal Realm. We'll all die together." Yu Qianqiu raised 3 fingers and counted with a ferocious expression. 1, 2. The ruthlessness of a hooligan was undeniable. However, before he could finish counting 2, Grey Cloud Xian gritted his teeth and turned into a flowing light. He felt extremely sullen in his heart. A grand early-stage Immortal Emperor expert was actually scared away by a small fry. However, he really couldn't afford to play such a hooligan game. Even if he wanted to bet, he didn't have the guts to do so. His life was more precious than the other parties. This was the so-called barefooted person, wasn't afraid of those who wore shoes. Yu Qianqiu winked and cheerfully put away the flying swords that were circling around him. He really didn't have the confidence to fight against such an expert. If he wasn't forced into a corner, it would be best not to fight against such a person. The risk factor was just too great. As long as he could force the other party a little further away, once he left the Paradise Immortal Realm, he would be able to escape at any time. Otherwise, with the other party by his side, there was a possibility of being killed at any time. Perhaps, he wouldn't even have the time to escape. However, he only laughed for a short while before he couldn't laugh anymore. He could faintly see that Grey Cloud Xian was always in front of him. Clearly he was staring at him. According to this trend, the other party would sooner or later be waiting for him at the border of the Paradise Immortal Realm. However, it wasn't convenient for him to teleport away. Moreover, he couldn't stay here or change his flying direction. He believed that if he did that, the people from the Immortal Palace would immediately come to interfere. However, after thinking about it, he felt relieved. Grey Cloud Xian was so timid he probably wouldn't dare to make a move at the border of the Paradise Immortal realm. In the end, as Yu Qianqiu expected, when he was about to fly to the border of the Paradise Immortal realm, Grey Cloud Xn was floating in midair hundreds of meters away, waiting for him with a sinister smile. Yu Qianqiu's figure flashed and landed on a hill at the critical point. He raised his middle finger at Song Yin Xian, his face full of mockery and disdain, and then directly burrowed into the ground. He knew Earth escape. Grey Cloud Xian was shocked. He immediately teleported over and scanned the surroundings with his perception. However, he couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianqiu. Grey Cloud Xian didn't believe that Yu Qianqiu could escape so quickly underground. Everything had happened in the blink of an eye. With the other party's cultivation, it was impossible for his Earth escape speed to be faster than the speed of his perception. However, after searching all over the place, he still couldn't find anything. In the end, the enraged Grey Cloud Xian would immediately wave his palms and shoot out rays of light whenever he found any suspicious places underground. Explosions shook the surroundings, blasting hundreds of deep holes in the ground. However, he still couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianqiu. After the commotion ended, Grey Cloud Xn couldn't help but stand dumbstruck on a hill in the wilderness. If this matter got out, he would definitely become the laughingstock of the immortal world. With his cultivation, he actually didn't even have the ability to hunt down Yu Qianqiu. In the Paradise Immortal mountain range, not too far away, two golden-robed guards looked at each other. They had secretly received Wu Xiong's instructions to monitor the outcome of Grey Cloud Xian's attack on Yu Qianqiu. The two of them originally thought that Yu Qianqiu was dead for sure this time, but they didn't expect Grey Cloud Xian to actually fail. The two of them nodded speechlessly and turned into rays of light to return to life. In the basement of the World Commerce Association, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared. He easily took off all his clothes and then soaked himself in the bath pool. Leaning against the wall, he leisurely hummed a part of a Beijing opera tune. Back then, this old man's team had just opened. There were only a dozen people and 7 or 8 guns. The Imperial Army chased me until I was dizzy. Thanks to sister-in-law Qing, she told me to hide in a water jar. It was late at night, and the wedding banquet in the Foreign Affairs Grand Commander's manor had already ended. Mu Bing was in a side room happily directing 2 guards to count the congratulatory gifts sent by various sections. De Ming Luan, Lu Yanqing, Mu Tianjiao, and Wu Xiong were standing in the attic discussing something. You really don't want to go back? De Ming Luan stared at Lu Yanqing and frowned. Miss Lu, I advise you to go back with me first. Before Yu Qianqiu left, he asked me to bring you back. Since I've already agreed, how can I not keep my promise? If there's anything, you can talk to Yu Qianqiu yourself. I won't get involved in your matters. Wu Xiong glanced at the hesitant Lu Yanqing. Under Mu Tianjiao's invitation, Lu Yanqing had already agreed to stay with Mu Tianjiao and not return to the World Commerce Association. Wu Xiong smiled and said to De Mingluan, Brother Mingluan, since Miss Lu has already agreed to my wife's request to stay, why don't you give me some face and let Miss Lu stay here? As for the World Commerce Association, it doesn't matter if she returns or not. I'm afraid that Yu Qianqiu won't be able to escape from Ash Grey Cloud Xan. De Mingluan glanced at him and sneered. You're that confident? What if Yu Qianqiu escapes from Ash Grey Cloud Xan? So what? Wu Xiong glanced at Mu Tianjiao and said with a faint smile. Even if Yu Qianqiu is still alive, so what? If I, Wu Xiong, ask for a person from Yu Qianqiu, would he dare to refuse? De Mingluan's brows furrowed again. After thinking for a while, he said to Lu Yanqing, Miss Lu, if you really don't want to go back, why don't you write down your reasons? I'll help you bring them to Yu Qianqiu. It's better than having me go back empty-handed. Lu Yanqing nodded slightly and took out a jade archive. After thinking for a while, she injected something into it and handed it over to De Mingluan. De Mingluan put away the jade archive and stared at Lu Yanqing. I'll ask you again. This is your own choice. Is no one forcing you? Wu Xiong heard this and laughed. Brother Mingluan, you make it sound like I'm forcing Miss Lu to stay. Lu Yanqing bit her lip and said, I'm staying of my own accord. I don't want to return to the World Commerce Association. De Mingluan looked at her silently for a while. Seeing that she didn't seem to be lying, he said indifferently, "Logically speaking, I should be forcefully bringing you back. But for Brother Wu's sake, I'll let it go. You're on your own." Finished speaking, he cupped his fists at Wu Xiong and was about to leave. But coincidentally, the two guards sent to keep an eye on Yu Qianqiu and Greycloud Xian had returned. They walked to the bottom of the stairs and bowed to Wu Xiong. Wu Xiong immediately smiled and said, "Brother Mingluan, please stay for now. It won't be too late to leave after listening." He then asked the two guards, "How's the situation?" The two of them looked at each other. One of them cupped his fists and replied, "Reporting to the great commander, Greycloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu confronted each other after leaving the paradise of bliss. Just as Greycloud Xian was about to make a move, Yu Qianqiu used the earth escape technique to escape. Greycloud Xian caused quite a commotion to chase after him, but he still couldn't stop Yu Qianqiu from escaping. Wu Xiong was stunned. He had thought that Yu Qianqiu was dead for sure. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, it was impossible for him to escape from Greycloud Xian's clutches. That was why he had De Mingluan stay behind to listen. This way, De Mingluan would know that Lu Yanqing had stayed behind and wouldn't make things difficult for him. But what he couldn't believe was that Greycloud Xian had actually let Yu Qianqiu escape. De Mingluan heaved a sigh of relief after hearing this. He was also amazed in his heart. He thought to himself that this Yu Qianqiu was really not simple. De Mingluan didn't say anything. He glanced at Wu Xiong indifferently. This Wu Xiong undoubtedly owed him another favor. He didn't say anything else and turned into a stream of light and flew away. He really wasn't someone ordinary people could compare to. Mu Tianjiao sighed slightly in her heart and looked at Lu Yanqing. The reason why she had urged Lu Yanqing to stay behind was because she had judged that Yu Qianqiu was extraordinary. Greycloud Xian might not be able to kill him, and now it had confirmed her judgment. Only she knew the reason why she had left Lu Yanqing behind. She knew that the relationship between the Mu family and Yu Qianqiu could not be salvaged, but she still wanted to make one last effort. She vaguely felt that Lu Yanqing might be able to play a role when the time came. She might even be able to save Mu Bing's life at a critical moment, so she had tried her best to keep her. Chapter 9:15. However, she didn't force Lu Yanqing to stay. She only asked her to stay by calling her a sister. This was because she didn't want to detain Lu Yanqing to threaten Yu Qianqiu in the future. She understood that it would be difficult for a person like Yu Qianqiu to use threats to have any effect. She only hoped that Lu Yanqing's plea would be of some use at the critical moment. If she forced Lu Yanqing to stay, then the hatred between her and Yu Qianqiu would only deepen. On the contrary, the gains would not make up for the losses. However, to Mu Tianjiao's surprise, it didn't take much effort to keep Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing agreed after thinking for a while. He can actually escape from Songyan Xian's hands. Wu Xiong looked at the great bright wheel that disappeared into the night sky, and still couldn't believe it. He knew in his heart that in terms of cultivation, he and the great bright wheel were not necessarily stronger than Songyan Xian. For Yu Qianqiu to be able to escape from Songyan Xian's hands, it could only mean that this person was indeed not simple. "It's late at night, Miss Lu should go and rest," Wu Xiong suddenly said to Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing bowed slightly to the couple and then left. After Lu Yanqing left, Wu Xiong tilted his head and ordered, "Bring me the gift from Yu Qianqiu." The two guards immediately received the order and left. Not long after, they came back with a square brocade box that wasn't too big. The words "Yu Qianqiu of the World Chamber of Commerce congratulates" were pasted on it. Wu Xiong took it and opened it. He couldn't help but be stunned. There was a pair of palm-sized golden men inside. It wasn't anything valuable. His subordinate took the empty gift box, and Wu Xiong took out the pair of golden men to examine. He discovered that it was the sculpture of him and Mu Tianjiao tying the knot. The carvings were lifelike and lifelike. It was obvious that some thought had been put into it. The 4 words "Forever and Earth" were engraved on the base. Although it was a very simple gift, it showed the sincerity of the sender. Wu Xiong silently glanced at Mu Bing, who was busy counting the congratulatory gifts. and sighed regretfully in his heart. If it weren't for you, why would I have to drive away a sincere congratulatory guest? Little did they know that Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to give away this thing, because he realized that the valuable immortal herb he had prepared in advance was simply not presentable, and he did not have the time to prepare another one. So he could only use the gold Ju to show his sincerity. Yu Qianqiu is Madam's friend. Madam, take a look. Handing the sculpture over to Mu Tianjiao, Wu Xiong sighed. I'm afraid that my actions today have hurt your friend. Mu Tianjiao held the sculpture in silence, her gaze lingering on the 4 words forever and earth for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. It's late. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Tianjiao with a sly smile. Madam, the most important part of the wedding hasn't been completed yet. Mu Tianjiao was startled for a moment, then immediately understood what he meant. Her face instantly became flushed, and she was so embarrassed that she could barely lift her head. Wu Xiong laughed heartily as he grabbed her hand and pulled her away. The door to the bedroom in the inner residence was tightly shut, and the room was brightly lit, illuminating the newly decorated bridal chamber. Under the illumination of the candles, a beautiful couple sat on the edge of the bed, their arms crossed, and drank a cup of cross-cup wine. Wu Xiong took the empty wine cup from Mu Tianjiao's hand, and with a wave of one hand, the 2 wine cups landed firmly on the table in the room. At this moment, Mu Tianjiao's face was flushed, and her head was slightly lowered. Under the candlelight, she looked especially charming. Wu Xiong couldn't help but feel a little dazed. His throat moved, and he swallowed his saliva. Out of all the people in the world, I was moved the first time I saw you, madam. I have never felt this way since I embarked on the path of cultivation. Madam, don't you think this is fate? Mu Tianjiao softly said, with infinite shyness, and let Wu Xiong hold her hand as he stood up. Wu Xiong lowered his head to her ear, and inhaled the faint fragrance of her body. He softly said, On the night of our wedding, madam, are you ready? Although he asked this, his hand directly reached for the belt at her waist, regardless of whether she agreed or not. Mu Tianjiao couldn't help but tremble. She only felt the belt loosen, and her clothes were already undone. She couldn't help but nervously close her eyes. Although he couldn't see anything with his eyes, he could feel that his clothes were being undone piece by piece from the outside to the inside, gently sliding to the ground. Very quickly, a slight chill invaded his skin, and a pair of strong palms directly touched his slightly trembling body. Her body was petite and exquisite, but it didn't lose its ample curves. Her skin was smooth and lustrous under the candlelight. Mu Tianjiao's alluring naked body stood unreservedly in front of Wu Xiong. Wu Xiong found it difficult to move his gaze, and he swallowed with difficulty. He could feel Mu Tianjiao's rapidly rising and falling full breasts, and he could feel her accelerated heartbeat. He immediately and efficiently took off his clothes and hugged Mu Tianjiao by the waist. As soon as Mu Tianjiao came into contact with the other party's similarly naked skin and smelled a rich masculine scent, she couldn't help but let out a moan. She didn't dare to open her eyes at all. The naked man and woman quickly rolled onto the bed, and a brocade quilt covered their restless and entangled bodies. Wu Xiong, who was half on top of Mu Tianjiao, looked at the beauty whose eyes were tightly shut, and said with a smile, From today onwards, you are truly my wife. Why are you still shy when you see me? Madam, open your eyes and look at me. Feeling the restless object in her lower body, Mu Tianjiao's eyes trembled open, and she looked at the man in front of her, who was pressing on top of her. However, the moment she opened her eyes, she saw the naughty smile on the man's face in front of her. Following that, a heavy pressure came from her lower body, and that restless thing directly penetrated her. Mu Tianjiao immediately let out a cry of pain, and in an instant, the brocade quilt flipped, and the room was filled with the stirring of passion. It was late in the morning, but no one dared to disturb the newlyweds in the room. On the brocade bed in the room, the man and woman embraced each other naked. After a night of overflowing passion, Mu Tianjiao, who had just received the pleasure of the rain and dew, almost had no strength left in her body. The flush on her face had yet to fade, and she lay softly in Wu Xiong's arms. Madam, do you regret following Wu Xiong? Wu Xiong suddenly looked at the woman in his arms and asked. Mu Tianjiao lay on his chest and shook her head, saying, Mu Tianjiao is not a fickle person. In this life, I will only follow one man and make a choice once. Since I've followed him, I will never regret it. As she spoke, she raised her head to look at Wu Xiong and said, Unless my lord doesn't want me anymore, I won't ask to live together, but I will ask to die together. Wu Xiong immediately covered her mouth and said with a satisfied smile, What do you mean live or die? How can you say such things on such a joyous occasion? Moreover, in the immortal world, besides the immortal emperor, who dares to decide our life and death? Mu Tianjiao subconsciously looked at the golden sculpture that Yu Qianqiu gave her on the dressing table, and a trace of uneasiness flashed through her subconscious. She bit her red lips and said, My lord, my father's conduct is not satisfactory, and I hope my lord will forgive him in the future. Of course, we are all one family now, so how can we be different? Wu Xiong gently patted her smooth back and said, Get up and change your clothes. We are newlyweds, and I will take you to the immortal palace to pay our respects to the immortal emperor. The two immediately got up to wash up and change their clothes. Mu Tianjiao had just tasted the forbidden fruit, so her body was somewhat uncomfortable, and her movements were a bit slow. When Wu Xiong saw this, he glanced at the red spots on the bed and couldn't help but laugh happily. Mu Tianjiao, who was sitting in front of the dressing table, was startled. She didn't know what he was laughing about, but she saw Wu Xiong stride over and gently take away the eyebrow pencil in her hand. He pressed down on her shoulder to prevent her from getting up, and patiently helped Mu Tianjiao draw her eyebrows. Mu Tianjiao was pleasantly surprised, and she acted like a spoiled child to cover up. My lord's technique is so skilled. It seems like you are an expert. Who knows how many times you have done this? Wu Xiong laughed and said, This is my first time doing this, and I didn't expect to receive madam's praise on my first try. Then, he pointed the eyebrow pencil at the golden sculpture on the dressing table and said, To be able to cooperate so well, it seems like we are really a match made in heaven. Then in this life, let me draw your eyebrows. I will draw it for eternity. Mu Tianjiao's gaze suddenly stopped at the base of the golden sculpture. The four words eternity suddenly made her feel a little irritated. It was clearly a blessing, but it felt like mockery. She felt a little uneasy in her heart, but she couldn't explain why. She couldn't help asking herself, could it be because this thing was a gift from Yu Qianqiu, and she had once confessed her love to Yu Qianqiu, so she felt uneasy in front of Wu Xiong? In the illusory immortal city, the news of Yu Qianqiu being humiliated and expelled at Wu Xiong's wedding banquet, and then being hunted down by Ash Cloud Xian to his death, had already spread like wildfire. This news was naturally spread by the representatives of the various sects who went to Wu Xiong's wedding banquet. Although they only saw the mess on the ground and didn't see Yu Qianqiu's corpse, in their understanding, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to escape Ash Cloud Xian's pursuit. Of course he was dead. Yu Nantian, who had accepted Yu Qianqiu's instructions and wandered around the illusory immortal city from day to night, was shocked when he heard this news. He immediately rushed back to the World Chamber of Commerce to discuss it with Hu Changshou. The two of them knew that this was a serious matter, and the news couldn't be spread before it was confirmed. Otherwise, it would cause the hearts of the people in the World Chamber of Commerce to fall apart. Thus, they went upstairs together to ask for confirmation. However, this news had already spread like wildfire, so how could it be hidden? Many people in the illusory immortal city heard the news and came to the World Chamber of Commerce to inquire about this matter. They were more or less taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. This was terrible. The lords of the various countries were all alarmed. They left a portion of people to guard downstairs, and the majority of them gathered upstairs, after Wei Chuanxiu, who was guarding by Suzhen's door, heard Yu Nantian and Hu Changshou's narration. He immediately snorted disdainfully and said, This is utter nonsense. I can't wait for him to die, but your sect master's life is very cheap. He even wandered around in front of me early in the morning, and was chased away by me. It would be strange if he could die. Yu Nantian and Hu Changshou looked at each other, and felt that Wei Chuanxiu was comforting them. At the same time, The lords of the various countries also ran up in a bustling manner. When they saw the three people at the door, they immediately made a big fuss and hurriedly reported the news they heard. Chapter 9:16. At this time, the door to Wei Chuanqiu's room at the end of the corridor suddenly opened, and a sleepy Yu Qianqiu walked out. Standing at the door, he knocked on it twice, immediately attracting everyone's attention. They saw Yu Qianqiu pointing at a group of people and cursing. "What is it? Why are you shouting and making a ruckus here? Are you all tired of living and want to rebel? Get out of here if you don't want to die." In the eyes of these people, Yu Qianqiu's authority was unquestionable. The authority of the torture envoy had long been ingrained in their bones. The most terrifying thing was that apart from this torture envoy, there was also the old torture envoy who was even more powerful than the immortal Emperor Jin Tai in their hearts. That old torture envoy was someone who dared to go to the underworld to fight the Emperor of the underworld. No one doubted that the old torture envoy would come out to fight Jin Tai one day. Who knew if the current torture envoy and the old torture envoy were still in contact? However, seeing that the current torture envoy, Yu Qianqiu, dared to come to the celestial realm to cause trouble, it was obvious that he was very confident. Although Bai Changchun had left them for many years, the shadow left in their hearts was hard to erase. Especially the legend of him fighting the Emperor of the underworld. It was even more terrifying. They were both proud and afraid. When Yu Qianqiu showed up and yelled at them, the rumor was shattered. Who dared to stay and look for trouble? The group of people immediately lost their temper and shut their mouths obediently. They all ran away with their tails between their legs, afraid that they would be beaten up if they were too slow. The entire 22nd floor became quiet again. What happened? Who died? Yu Qianqiu swayed his sleeves as he walked over. Wei Chuanqiu looked him up and down and asked suspiciously, "Everyone is saying that you were humiliated at Wu Xiong's wedding and then killed by Grey Cloud Xian. What is going on?" Yu Qianqiu was startled when he heard that. Then he sneered and gritted his teeth. "It's not just a humiliation, it's a great humiliation. It would have been fine if it was anyone else, but it just had to be you ingrate surnamed Mu. Don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you just because you have Wu Xiong's support. Wash your butts and wait for this daddy to kill your entire family and exterminate your entire sect. Ingrate bastard." Wei Chuanqiu had seen him angry before, but this was the first time she had seen this kind of anger that came from the depths of his bones. She paused and asked, "In that case, it's true that Sungyan Xian wanted to kill you. Not bad. You can escape from him." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and sneered. "He wants to kill me? If I wasn't at the edge of the paradise of bliss, I would have roasted him with my purple fire. Shoo." Wei Chuanqiu suddenly raised his hand to signal him to be quiet. He tilted his head to look at the staircase leading down from the rooftop and said, "Someone has arrived at the rooftop. It seems like he is negotiating with Yin Peng." In order to let Bai Suzhen cultivate in peace, he was on high alert at all times. Yu Qianqiu followed along and looked over, but didn't find anything. After waiting for a while, he suddenly saw a stream of light flash from the staircase and appear in front of the two of them. It was the Great Bright Wheel. When the Great Bright Wheel saw Yu Qianqiu, he was very surprised and asked, "Why are you back so soon?" According to his calculations, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, it would take at least a day for him to return. Due to the inconvenience of his identity, he wanted to inform Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng to go out and greet him on the way, in case something happened to Yu Qianqiu. He didn't expect that he had already returned. However, Yu Qianqiu looked behind him and asked, "She didn't come back with you?" Naturally, he was asking about Lu Yanqing. "She's still at Wu Xiong's manor." Before the Great Bright Wheel could finish, Yu Qianqiu's face had already turned ferocious. He said sternly, "Wu Xiong detained my people? She was the one who didn't want to return." The Great Bright Wheel handed the jade archive that Lu Yanqing asked him to hand over to Yu Qianqiu. He then tilted his head to look at the tightly shut door behind Wei Chuanqiu and asked with a frown, "Is Bai Suzhen inside?" It's not convenient to disturb her cultivation inside." Wei Chuanqiu chuckled guiltily. The Great Bright Wheel gave him a meaningful look. It was obvious that he was suspicious, but he didn't say anything more. He turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the staircase. After reading the contents of the Jade Archive, Yu Qianqiu casually crushed it into powder. He shook his head helplessly and said, "What kind of bullsh** tea is this? She's an intelligent person, but too bad she doesn't have a brain. Damn it, she's always doing things that she thinks she's a burden." The contents of the Jade Archive were very simple. The gist of it was that Lu Yanqing felt that she was useless, and that there was no point for her to stay at the World Chamber of Commerce. When Lanfeng's departure made her feel very guilty, it also made her realize that a useless person like her should leave the World Chamber of Commerce. Hence, she decided to accept Mu Tianjiao's invitation to stay there and not return. She didn't want to be a burden to the World Chamber of Commerce anymore. Although it wasn't explicitly stated between the lines, the meaning was clear. She would rather die than divulge the secrets of the World Chamber of Commerce. Perhaps it was because the Jade Archive was handed over by someone else that she didn't explicitly state it. In this regard, Yu Qianqiu was speechless. If someone really wanted to pry any secrets out of her, he would have 100 ways to easily make her speak the truth. Because this woman was kind to the point of being pedantic. To put it bluntly, she was stupid. She didn't have a brain, only a face. However, since she was willing to stay, it was likely that no one would force her to say anything in the short term. However, it was hard to say if she stayed in the cunning fox's den for too long. What made Yu Qianqiu the most speechless was that he had already vaguely guessed Mu Tianjiao's intention in detaining Lu Yanqing. Perhaps when he made his move against the Mu family, this woman would instigate Lu Yanqing to plead for mercy. If this wasn't pulling him back, then what was? How could he vent the hatred in his heart if he didn't wash away the humiliation that the family of three had inflicted on him with blood? I can tolerate anything but betrayal. It's too late to redeem myself now. Yu Qianqiu paced back and forth in deep thought. No matter what, he felt that it wouldn't be a good thing for him and the World Chamber of Commerce if that stupid woman Lu Yanqing fell into someone else's hands. Sooner or later, something would happen. His footsteps paused, and he casually came up with an idea. He felt that he needed to find an opportunity for Wei Chuanxiu to ask the Great Bright Will to make another trip and bring that stupid woman, Lu Yanqing, back. The idea was simple. He was also prepared to have the Great Bright Will bring a Jade Archive to Lu Yanqing. This was called giving her a taste of her own medicine. He didn't need to be too clever to trick that stupid woman back. He just needed to write a paragraph in the Jade Archive, saying that when Lanfeng had returned from the outside with serious injuries and was on the verge of death, he wanted to see her one last time and wasn't afraid that she wouldn't return. Once she returned, he would immediately send her back to the human realm for no reason. He would let her be merciful in the human realm and continue to be that merciful and compassionate Guanyin Bodhisattva. Wei Chuanxiu saw the sinister smile on his face as he fell into deep thought. He couldn't help but ask, "Brat, what kind of rotten idea are you coming up with to harm people again?" Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He waved his hand and said, "Nonsense. Am I that kind of person? Forget it, I won't talk about it anymore. I need to go out and expose myself. I need to stop those unfavorable rumors from spreading." With that said, he flicked his sleeves and left, leaving Wei Chuanxiu standing there with a look of disdain on his face. Inside Wan Gutong's branch, the moment Wan Lihong exited the paradise of bliss, she had spent a long time investigating the ruins left behind by Greycloud Xian before coming here. In the rear hall, Wan Lihong told Wan Ling and Wan Gai in detail how Yu Qianqiu was humiliated at Wu Xiong's wedding banquet, as well as how Greycloud Xian tried to kill him afterwards. Wan Gai sighed and said, "This matter has already spread like wildfire. It looks like this Yu Qianqiu has already fallen into Greycloud Xian's hands. I find it strange. Isn't this Yu Qianqiu a member of the Immortal Palace? Why would the Immortal Palace let him die at Greycloud Xian's hands?" Wan Ling and Wan Lihong looked at each other. Wan Ling asked suspiciously, "You're saying that Yu Qianqiu is a member of the Immortal Palace?" Wan Gui rolled his eyes. "I'm not an idiot, don't try to hide it from me. The sect master has personally asked about it several times. On top of the series of events that have happened, if I still can't guess his background, then there's no need for me to stay here. Wan Lihong smiled bitterly. It's enough for you to know this, don't spread it. Wan Ling also smiled awkwardly, indicating that she didn't mean to hide it. Then, she asked suspiciously, Fifth uncle, in that case, you didn't see Yu Qianqiu being killed by Grey Cloud Exine with your own eyes? Yes. I also feel that with Yu Qianqiu's background, not to mention that it was near the paradise of bliss, no matter how high Grey Cloud Exine's cultivation was, he couldn't have killed Yu Qianqiu. Wan Lihong looked solemnly at Wan Ling. Linger, if Grey Cloud Exine really killed Yu Qianqiu, the immortal emperor will be furious, and the division of power in the immortal world will change again. We Wan Gu Tong must prepare for a rainy day and seize the initiative. I'm here to ask you to personally go to the World Commerce Hall and wait. See if Yu Qianqiu really died in Grey Cloud Exine's hands. Fifth uncle, I understand your meaning, I'll go now. Wan Ling understood and immediately left. When Wan Ling arrived at the World Commerce Hall, she saw Yu Qianqiu standing outside the building, pointing at a group of people and cursing. Who's the one who started this rumor, cursing me to die? Just that old bastard Grey Cloud Exine wants to kill me? All of you scram. The group of onlookers really did scram, but it was obvious that they were sent by the sects to gather information, so they left to report. Even though the sects didn't know as much as Wan Ling, gathering information was the least they could do. In the blink of an eye, the area in front of the World Commerce Hall became much quieter. Wan Ling was speechless when she saw Long Xiaojiu standing beside Yu Qianqiu, smiling like a flower, as if she really liked Yu Qianqiu. Seeing this scene, Wan Ling suddenly felt a nerve in her brain inexplicably throbbing. She felt as if her nerves had suddenly gone haywire. She couldn't help but recall that day in the bathroom downstairs of the World Chamber of Commerce, when she was forced to flee in tears by Long Xiaojiu. Wan Ling's face instantly lit up with a bright smile, and she dashed down, blocking the path of a man and a woman who were about to enter the building. Seeing that it was Wan Ling, Yu Qianqiu was about to greet her with a smile, but Wan Ling leaned over and called out sweetly, Big brother Yu, it's great to see that you're fine. Do you know how worried I was when I heard the rumor that something happened to you? Her voice was coy, almost causing goosebumps to rise all over Yu Qianqiu's body. Chapter 917. Brother Yu? Yu Qianqiu was somewhat baffled. He couldn't help but touch his own face. He didn't seem to be so handsome that everyone would like him. Shameless slut. Long Xiaojiu snorted in disdain. Who are you scolding, Miss Long? Wan Ling's eyes flashed fiercely. Long Xiaojiu snorted and didn't reply. If she pointed out names, it would undoubtedly give the other party a reason to flip out. In any case, everyone knew who she was scolding. It was fine as long as she could piss them off. Yu Qianqiu had already heard about these two, especially Wan Ling's abnormal story. He immediately woke up from his narcissism and realized that he had become the object of these two women's competition. He immediately said to them bluntly, You two are here to scout for information. Now that you see that I'm not dead, why aren't you going back to report? The two women's expressions were a bit awkward after being exposed by him. However, Wan Ling's skin was clearly thicker. She rolled her eyes and replied, Brother Yu, others might not know you, but do you think I don't? How could Songyan Exine hurt you in the pure paradise immortal realm? I'm here to ask Brother Yu. The once-in-a-century ranking conference is about to begin. I wonder if Brother Yu's World Commerce Association is going to participate? Who's your brother? You're so many times older than me. Although Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, he still believed Wan Ling's words. After all, she had always thought that he was the immortal emperor's trusted secret agent. As for this once-in-a-century ranking conference, he had stayed in the illusionary immortal city for a long time. It could be said that he had heard about it for a long time. The ranking conference was actually a challenge competition. The rules were very simple. Every sect had 10 chances to challenge and be challenged. Under normal circumstances, the lower-ranked sects would challenge the higher-ranked sections. Every challenge would be won by 3 out of 5 wins. The winner of the challenge would naturally push the loser down from their original ranking. The loser would also have a chance to regain their ranking. However, the chances were the same. Everyone only had 10 chances. If the 10 chances were used up, then your sex ranking would be fixed. If you wanted to compete again, you would have to wait for 100 years. In the end, the top 100 sects and the top 100 chambers of commerce would be chosen. In fact, after countless years of evolution, the majority of the chambers of commerce and sects had become family-like. This was something that could not be helped, regardless of which sect's leaders were more or less selfish. It was only natural for them to take care of their descendants. The years of immortal cultivation were endless. Gradually, the number of descendants increased. It was not strange for a sect or a chamber of commerce to become a family. As for those brothers and subordinates who had fought together with him in the past, they would slowly be ostracized. Although it was cruel, it was very realistic. Even if some disciples with other surnames joined in, they would all be putting their lives on the line. It would be very difficult for them to hold power. To put it bluntly, the ranking conference would determine the top 200 sections. The top 200 sects had to participate in the next ranking assembly and accept challenges. There was no reason to refuse. The rules were set by the Immortal Palace. Who would dare to refuse? Of course, the various sects of the immortal dimension were risking their lives to participate in the ranking conference, naturally for the sake of benefits. One should know that the various sects had to support so many disciples. The consumption of spirit stones was very large. This was because spirit stones could be used as currency in the immortal dimension. They were also necessary consumables for the cultivation of the various sections. The more people a sect had, the more spirit stones they needed to support it. However, after countless years, the spirit stone reserves in the immortal dimension were almost depleted. The spirit stone reserves in the 72 worlds of the human world were not enough for the various sections. Now, the largest source of spirit stones in the immortal dimension was the underworld. Therefore, all the sects wanted to squeeze into the underworld to make a fortune. However, the Immortal Palace guarded and controlled the passage to the underworld. It was not that the Immortal Palace did not allow people to make a fortune in the underworld. If they wanted to enter, they could as long as they had a pass issued by the Immortal Palace. The only way to obtain a pass was to participate in the ranking assembly. Every assembly would issue 500 passes. The top 200 sects would be divided according to their ranking. One pass could bring 100 people into the underworld. Some sects that had been in the top 200 for a long time had accumulated a large number of people in the pass. The more people that entered the underworld, the more spirit stones they would earn. The large sects would easily send thousands of people into the underworld. The profits they earned could be imagined. This was the main reason why the sects fought over the rankings. However, entering the underworld was not smooth sailing. The underworld was chaotic and vast. It was not something the immortal dimension could compare to. Warlords were divided, and the emperor of the underworld reigned supreme. In short, the risk factor was very high. The pass in the hands of the various sects would often be lost. Therefore, they needed to participate in the ranking assembly to replenish it. Most importantly, when walking in the underworld, they would often encounter the patrolling dark underworld army. Without the protection of a pass, they would be killed by the dark underworld army as trespassers. There were also some sects that were unable to survive and had no choice but to sell their pass. For example, Mu Tianjiao's Four Links Chamber of Commerce had obtained one because of this. As for whether or not to participate in the ranking assembly, Yu Qianqiu thought for a long time. He wanted a pass, but with the strength of the World Chamber of Commerce, it was almost impossible to enter the top 200. Even if he participated, it would be a waste. At the same time, there were a few things that made him suspicious. The fight between the various sects' disciples in the Divine Ruin Realm, the challenge of the Life and Death Mound's sect master, and this ranking assembly, as well as the various dangers that were rumored to be encountered after entering the underworld. He had experienced two of these four things. In both cases, the disciples of various sects were bathed in blood and killing each other. He always felt that the immortal palace was thinking of ways to purposely deplete the strength of the various sects in the immortal dimension. Especially the matter of the life and death mounds sect master challenge. Killing was forbidden in the illusionary immortal city, so why was it only permissible for sect masters to kill each other? Think about it, if the leader of a sect died, then the sect was very likely to be in turmoil. It might even collapse or be swallowed by other forces. This was something that Yu Qianqiu had unintentionally thought of after experiencing the life and death mounds challenge. He vaguely smelled a conspiracy. However, the immortal palace was too ruthless. How could a sect survive without spirit stones? Especially those large sects that had more people to support. There were restrictions in the immortal dimension. If one wanted to earn large amounts of spirit stones, they could only go to the underworld. However, to go to the underworld, they had to obtain a passage token. Even Yu Qianqiu had no other way. If they wanted to go to the underworld, they had to first obtain a passage token. Otherwise, even if they found a way to sneak into the underworld, they wouldn't be able to pass through the dark underworld army. Therefore, they still had to think of a way to obtain a passage token. Ranking assembly? Yu Qianqiu looked at Wan Ling and said with a bitter smile, "With our world commerce's current strength, do you think there's any meaning in participating in the ranking assembly? Even if we go, we won't be able to squeeze into the top 200. Wan Ling chuckled and said, "Doesn't Big Brother you have 2 experts under him? If White Cloud Mountain Chieftain and Green Wingbat King were to make a move, we might have a chance." Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Nothing could happen to these 2 experts at the moment. The world commerce still had to rely on them to scare people. Especially Wei Chuanqiu. They still had to rely on him to impart the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra to Bai Suzhen. Nothing could happen to him. As for the passage token, it wasn't necessary to participate in the ranking assembly to obtain it. Stealing, robbing were all good methods. Of course, it would be even better if someone was willing to sell it. It naturally wouldn't do if the price was too high. We'll talk about this when the time comes. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't be accompanying the 2 of you. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands towards the 2 girls and entered the world commerce's building in a flash. Meanwhile, Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu looked at each other in disdain, snorted provocatively, and went their separate ways. On the first floor of the world commerce, Yu Qianqiu walked around the various counters that sold immortal herbs. He discovered that there weren't many immortal herbs left, and business was very quiet. Most of the country lords had returned to their rooms to meditate and cultivate. Only a small portion of people remained at their posts, seemingly taking turns to be on duty. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had come to inspect, someone couldn't help but grumble to him. "Sect Master, take out some good stuff to sell. If this goes on, there won't be any customers coming. You guys sell what you want. Whether they want to buy it or not, just take your time to sell it." Yu Qianqiu left everyone speechless, then went upstairs. At this time, in the illusionary immortal city, the rumors about Yu Qianqiu being killed by Greycloud Xian were quickly purged. Instead, it was inconceivable that Greycloud Xian actually failed to kill Yu Qianqiu. Everyone found this a little hard to believe. Returning to the 22nd floor, Yu Qianqiu quickly took out a jade archive and inserted something into it. Then he walked to the door of his room. Wei Chuanqiu was sitting cross-legged at the door. Yu Qianqiu crouched in front of him and handed him the jade archive. "Bat King Wei, I'll have to trouble you with something. Based on your relationship with the Great Bright Wheel, can you ask the Great Bright Wheel to make another trip to Wu Xiong in the Paradise Immortal Realm and help me pass this jade archive to Lu Yanqing, then bring her back?" Wei Chuanqiu slowly opened his eyes and sneered. "Who do you think the Great Bright Wheel is, running errands for you when he has nothing better to do? Leave it here. If he goes to the Paradise Immortal Realm, I'll have him deliver it for you." He took the jade archive and put it away. Yu Qianqiu thanked him, then peeked through the crack in the door and said, "I won't disturb you anymore." Just as he was about to leave, he heard Wei Chuanqiu say, "Don't go yet. You have something to do first." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "What is it?" "At first, I was worried that you wouldn't be able to solve this problem. However, Seeing that you were able to safely escape from Grey Cloud Xian's hands, I've gained some confidence in you. Wei Chuanxiu glanced at him and said indifferently, didn't you say that I would only be responsible for teaching her the cultivation method, and that you would solve any problems? He had indeed said this before. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, what problems do you need me to solve? Why don't you tell me about it first? To cultivate the Myriad Demonic Heart Sutra, the first thing you need to do is to communicate with your own inner core. In other words, you need to understand your own inner core and become connected with it. She's almost done with this step. It won't be long before she enters the next step of cultivation. Wei Chuanxiu slowly stood up and said with a solemn expression, I want you to collect 10,000 inner cores to help her refine her own inner core. Collect 10,000 inner cores? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and asked in confusion. What do you mean? How do I collect them? Kill Yao cultivators or ferocious beasts and seize their inner cores. Use their inner cores to help Bai Suzhen refine her own inner core, Wei Chuanxiu said, enunciating each word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He was tongue-tied for a while before he gulped and said, You're not joking, are you? Doesn't that mean I'll have to kill over 10,000 Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts? Where am I supposed to find so many fellows? Wei Chuanxiu's face was solemn like never before. He gritted his teeth and said, I know it's cruel. I don't want to do it either. After all, we're all demons. But with success comes sacrifice. If the demon clan has another ancestor of all demons, who would dare to easily enslave the demon clan and use them as mounts as they wish? Sacrificing a portion of the demons can save the dignity of the majority. It's worth it. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't expect this fellow to have such great ambitions. He actually wanted to benefit all demons. It seemed like he couldn't use him as a mount anymore. Wei Chuanxiu paused and continued. Of course, you don't really have to kill over 10,000 Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts. But the more inner cores there are, the better it will be for her to refine her inner core. Why is it called the Myriad Demonic Heart Sutra? Because a demon's inner core is equivalent to a demon's heart. It contains the meaning that only by comprehending the heart of 10,000 demons can one cultivate the true sutra. If one doesn't understand 10,000 demons, how can one be worthy of being the ancestor of all demons? So the more inner core she has, the better it will be for her future cultivation. If it's really difficult to obtain 10,000 inner cores, you have to get at least 5,000. Otherwise, her future cultivation will be very difficult. Yao cultivators, ferocious beasts also have inner cores. Then Wei Chuanxiu waved his hand and said, although ferocious beasts are chaotic and reckless, most of them are from the desolate era. Compared to normal birds and beasts, they all have unique talents. As long as a ferocious beast is born, it will start to nurture its inner core. When it reaches adulthood, its inner core will also be formed. Unlike other birds and beasts, they need to cultivate painstakingly before they can condense their inner core. Once a ferocious beast develops its spiritual intelligence and becomes an immortal beast, its inner core will fuse with its main body. Heaven's creation has its differences. There are gains and losses. It's really magical. And the reason why I have an inner core is because I've spent many years to gradually find a way to separate the inner core that has fused with my main body. When my inner core is completely condensed, I can start cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. When are you going to return my inner core to me? Yu Qianqiu was listening intently and nodded repeatedly. He didn't expect him to suddenly change the topic. He coughed and said perfunctorily, What's the hurry? I'll naturally return it to you when the time comes. Where am I going to kill so many Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts? The celestial realm is mostly immortal beasts. If I have to find them one by one, how long will it take? The place with the most Yao cultivators is naturally the human world. The place with the most ferocious beasts is naturally the divine ruin realm. Wei Chuanxiu frowned and said, It's best to get more inner cores from both ferocious beasts and Yao cultivators. The more complex the better. That way, it will be more beneficial to her future cultivation. Chapter 918. Human World. Yu Qianqiu hesitated and frowned. As the torturer of the realm of monsters and ghosts, he commanded countless monster cultivators and ghost cultivators. It was not difficult for him to obtain 10,000 monster cores. But those demon cultivators and ghost cultivators were all prepared for the Fae and Ghost Immortal Exterminating Array. Especially after coming to the immortal realm, he could see and understand more clearly. If the spiritualization smoke was said to be the first barrier that prevented the immortal dimension from interfering with the mortal dimension, then the demonic spirit exterminating formation was the final trump card to prevent the immortal dimension and netherworld from interfering with the mortal dimension, and it was also the only trump card. It couldn't be used rashly, and once it was used, it would be a peerless trump card. Even if the immortal emperor and emperor of the netherworld were to fall into this formation, they would probably only have a slim chance of survival. Generations of torture enforcers had been stationed in the realm of monsters and ghosts to prepare for the activation of the formation of monsters and ghosts. Although it was inferred that the demon cultivators and ghost cultivators in the demon region would become sacrifices sooner or later, they were all subordinates of his commander after all. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to kill them. To put it bluntly, Yu Qianqiu could not bear to do it. Although he was cruel and merciless, that was only in situations that had nothing to do with him. If he wanted to be as merciless as Bai Changchun, he still needed time to temper himself. Seeing that he was speechless when he said the word human world, Wei Chuanxiu thought he was worried that he couldn't go to the human world to slay demons, so she immediately said, "In fact, the more inner Dan, the better it is." In other words, the higher the cultivation of the demon cultivator, the better it is, and the older the ferocious beast, the better it is. The best place to meet these conditions was actually the demon world. That was the true world of the demons, and there were countless old monsters there. However, the demon world had been sealed for many years, and there was no way to enter. Similarly, you have no way of entering the divine ruin realm. Most of the demon immortals who had ascended to the immortal world were under the command of the immortal palace. There were also those demon immortals who had the ability to establish themselves in the immortal world. They were not people you could afford to offend. As for the rest of the weaker ones, most of them have submitted to various forces in order to survive. You still can't afford to offend them. Come to think of it, you can only go to the human world to find a way. Yu Qianqiu felt helpless in his heart. He sighed inwardly. Could it be that he had no choice but to use his subordinates from the demon region? However, he replied perfunctorily, "Without the permission of the immortal palace, it's not easy to go to the human world. You worry too much. You don't have to go to the human world yourself. It's human nature to pursue profit. In the immortal world, as long as you have money, there's no problem you can't solve." Wei Chuanxiu took out a handful of divine-grade spirit stones, playing with them as he harumphed coldly. There are 72 worlds in the human world, other than the world where the immortal netherworld and Myriad Swords Devil Monarch fought. The other 71 worlds are frequently visited by the immortal palace's emissaries. You understand what to do now, right? Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up. If he could avoid hurting his innocent subordinates in the demon ghost realm, he should spend some money. He rubbed his hands and asked, "You mean, you want me to bribe the emissaries of the immortal palace with spirit stones, and ask them to help me collect Monster Dawn in the 71 worlds of the human world?" He was good at this, and he had practiced it in his previous life. Wei Chuanqiu immediately rolled her eyes. "Is there a need to be so sneaky? The more sneaky you are, the easier it is to arouse suspicion. Why don't you just spend money to buy the Monster Dawn? At that time, the emissaries of the immortal world will naturally come to the human world, and the cultivators in the human world will think of a solution. They don't need to do anything. They can just buy the Monster Dawn at a low price and sell them at a high price in the immortal world. One must know that a divine-grade spirit stone in the immortal world is worth a fortune in the human world. They won't need to spend much." Yu Qianqiu was aware of this point. A divine-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million spirit stones in the human world. It was indeed a fortune. Since there was a way to get the Monster Dawn, it was easy to handle. Moreover, it didn't seem like it would cost a lot of money. He waved his hand and said, "I understand, leave this matter to me." "Oh right, when do you want the monster dawn? Give me a time frame so I know what to do." Wei Chuanxiu glanced at the closed door behind her, pondered for a moment, then said, "Half a year later." About half a year later, she will enter the cultivation period to comprehend the heart of a myriad demon. The length of this period depends on her luck, and there is no turning back. There is only one chance. To put it bluntly, it depends on her talent in cultivating the heart of a myriad demon. The longer she takes to comprehend the heart of a myriad demon, the higher her talent, and the higher her achievements in the future. Conversely, her achievements will be limited, and it all depends on whether she has the heart of wisdom. Hence, the higher the quality of the monster dawn, the better, and the more complex it is, the better. If the time limit is limited, she can learn from the strong points of the heart of a myriad demon, and not waste this opportunity. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu's expression instantly turned solemn, nodding his head. "I understand, I'll get it done now." Looking at Yu Qianqiu's disappearing figure, Wei Chuanxiu sighed helplessly. He understood in his heart that once the news of purchasing Monster Dawn was released, it would be the beginning of a disaster for Yao cultivators in the human world. In reality, it was just as he expected. After the news of the purchase spread, the high-level Yao cultivators in the human world's 71 worlds met with great misfortune. They were hunted down by cultivators from all walks of life, and as a result, a blood feud was formed between humans and Yao that could no longer be reconciled. What surprised him was that the cultivators in the human world fought with each other over the huge profits. Often, a high-level monster dawn could incite endless massacres, and the price paid was even higher than that of the Yao cultivators. The only place that was spared was the world controlled by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to look for Jing Yuankong and leave the matter of purchasing the monster dawn to him. But when he reached the first floor, he hesitated. After some thought, he decisively went downstairs, passed through the main hall, and went straight to the Wan Gutong branch after exiting the World Commerce Chamber. This time, the door wasn't shut in his face like the last time. After Wan Gai received the report, he personally came out to welcome him. Yu Qianqiu followed him to the back hall, where Wan Lihong and Wan Ling were waiting. Wan Lihong immediately laughed when he saw him. "I didn't think we'd meet again so soon. Sect Master Yu's courage at the wedding is truly admirable. Don't mention the matter of this you being humiliated again." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists towards them and said bluntly, "One doesn't come to a temple without a cause, so this you won't beat around the bush. This time, I'm here to ask for a favor from your esteemed sect." The three of them looked at each other, and Wan Lihong forced a smile. "Why don't you tell us?" He was worried that Yu Qianqiu would ask for money again. "I want to purchase a large amount of beast cores from demonic beasts and wild beasts. I'd like to ask Wan Gutong to help me." Yu Qianqiu noticed the strange expressions on their faces and quickly added, "Don't worry, I'll pay you in advance. Of course, I won't let you guys work in vain. I'll also provide compensation. Purchase a large amount of beast cores." Other than refining pills, there aren't many uses for these things, Wan Lihong asked after a moment of doubt. "Since Sect Master Yu is willing to pay, then the World Commerce Chamber should be able to settle it themselves. Why do you need me, Wan Gutong, to help you? It's simple." Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over the group, his voice solemn. "You all know a little about my matters. This is my mission, but I don't want others to know that this matter has something to do with our World Commerce Chamber. After all, I've offended some people before, and I'm afraid that some people will try to ruin my plans. I'm sure you all understand, right?" His words were half-truths and half-lies. Other than the fact that he really didn't want others to know that this matter had something to do with the World Commerce Chamber, everything else was a lie. The reason was that the current World Commerce Chamber's business was very simple, and he didn't want to make it too complicated. At the moment, the World Commerce Chamber didn't have the strength to clash with other sects, so it was fine as long as the other sects got used to the World Commerce Chamber's existence. Under such a simple situation, suddenly purchasing a large amount of beast cores that didn't have much use for them. It would be hard not to attract attention. This matter concerned by Sujin's myriad demonic heart sutra, so it was better to be careful. After careful consideration, Yu Qianqiu decided to trick Wan Gutong into doing it. The other party's business was complicated and large. Adding one more item wouldn't attract any attention. The three of them had a look of realization on their faces, so they were here on a mission from the Immortal Palace. He was right. If the World Commerce Chamber directly purchased the beast cores, there might really be people who would cause trouble, such as the Heartless Palace. Since Sect Master Yu has already put it this way, it wouldn't be right for me, Wan Gutong, to not help. Wan Lihong heaved a sigh of relief, laughing heartily. But I wonder if Sect Master Yu has any specific requirements for purchasing beast cores? If you do, why don't you mention them all at once, lest any mistakes ruin Sect Master Yu's plans? Exalted Wan is indeed a straightforward person. If there's anything you need this Yu's help with in the future, this Yu will definitely not hesitate to help. Since the other party had agreed to help, Yu Qianqiu immediately offered an empty promise. Don't underestimate this empty promise, but it caused Wan Lihong and the others' eyes to light up. Yu Qianqiu then went back to the main topic. There are some requirements. We don't want beast cores below the demigod transformation stage. The higher the cultivation, the better. Beast cores must be at least adult beast cores, the older the better. We should try our best to avoid a situation where a large number of beast cores are the same. Also, I'll have to trouble your sect to keep this matter a secret. I don't want other sects to know about it. You don't have to worry about that. Wan Lihong laughed heartily. Wan Ling was also grinning from the side. But Wan Gi frowned, interrupting. Beast cores are easier to obtain, but beast cores are troublesome. They come from very few sources. I'm afraid it won't be easy to purchase them in large quantities. The other two immediately stopped laughing. They knew that Wan Gai was more experienced in this aspect than they were. After all, he had been in the hallucinatory immortal city for so many years. If he said it would be difficult, then it was most likely not far from the truth. Just do your best, there's no need to force it. Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. He sighed inwardly. It was indeed as Wei Chuanqiu had said. Looks like he still had to make a trip to the Godly Ruins realm to think of a way. To others, the Godly Ruins realm could only be entered once every 100 years. But to Yu Qianqiu, as long as he was brave enough, he could enter the Godly Ruins realm at any time he wanted. Both sides agreed on the purchase price, but Wan Lihong was adamant about not accepting the remuneration Huang Xiaolong had to give to Wan Gutong. Yu Qianqiu did not insist, but he was someone who could afford to let go. Without further ado, he directly threw out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones to Wan Gutong. Chapter 919. Wan Lihong then personally asked Wan Buosheng, who was far away in the Myriad Saints' palace. Wan Buosheng had no objections and agreed on the spot. After getting Wan Buosheng's approval, Wan Gui patted his chest and took charge of the matter, saying that he would personally arrange it. Yu Qianqiu was naturally very grateful for this. After arranging this matter, Yu Qianqiu took his leave and returned to the World Chamber of Commerce. After thinking along the way back to the World Chamber of Commerce, the first thing he did was to gather all the feudal lords to the conference room on the 21st floor to unify their thoughts. There was no other way. Many things could not be delayed any longer and had to be resolved. He had to hunt ferocious beasts in the ruins of God to obtain their cores, think of a way to get a pass to the netherworld, and think of a way to get a pill recipe from the Skyward Palace. Each of these things was very important to him, but he had a large group of people, but no competent assistants. This made him a little anxious. Sometimes, he even wanted to send all the feudal lords back to the human world and work alone. However, he also knew that this was somewhat unrealistic. He could not learn from Master Bai Changchun and be a loner, cultivating on his own, and moving forward wholeheartedly, not caring about anything else. The old fellow was having fun fighting and killing, and he did not even care about his descendants. In the end, he disappeared, causing him, as his disciple, to worry every day. He even had to think of a way to go to the netherworld to find out if he was dead or alive. Most importantly, he could not stand living a pure and desireless life like Master Bai Changchun, who told him to love life and to like beauties. In the end, he had too many fetters. If he wanted the people he cared about to live a good life, and if he wanted to live a good life, he had to have enough power in the three realms. To put it bluntly, he had to contend for hegemony and nurture a large group of people to help him solve his problems. Only with enough power could he live a leisurely life. Of course, the fastest way to have a huge power was to have a frighteningly high cultivation and make everyone submit to him. However, the idea of cultivating alone and becoming the #1 expert in the three realms was very childish in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. There was always only one first place. Although Yu Qianqiu had fantasized about such a miracle happening to him, fantasies could only be fantasies. He did not think that the first place would fall to him. People had to be more realistic. Before fantasies could happen to them, they had to face reality. For example, Jin Tai and Bai Qi could move freely in the three realms with their cultivation, but they still held the power of the netherworld and immortal realms. After all, it was impossible for the person he cared about to stay by his side and protect him forever. Therefore, he still had to lead a group of people to fight for power in the three realms. Even Wu Xiong could send golden-robed guards to protect Mu Tianjiao before she married him. Who would dare to touch Mu Tianjiao when she walked around the immortal world? This was the symbol of power, and now was the time to harden his heart and solve the problem. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. It was useless to reason with this group of people who were tired of living. It was all thanks to Mu Bing that Yu Qianqiu could be so ruthless. If he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be a man. Yu Qianqiu had to unify his subordinates' thoughts. He did not want them to drag him down. Everyone was gathered in the conference room. They looked at Yu Qianqiu, not knowing why he had gathered them. Yu Qianqiu looked at them and said, "Someone has been grumbling. What I want to say is that earning money is not the most important thing. I won't say anything else. I just want to tell everyone to obediently guard those broken immortal herbs and continue to sell them. It doesn't matter if you can sell them or not. Just treat it as a show. As for what outsiders say, there's no need to care about what they say. In short, you guys have to be relaxed on the outside, but tense on the inside. Don't cause any trouble to distract me. There's no need to beat the drum. That's all. Disperse." Yu Qianqiu left. The eyes of the remaining people lit up. Although the sect leader did not speak much, everyone knew what was going on. It seemed like everyone was just fooling around here on the surface. There was actually something going on behind the scenes. On the rooftop, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. White clouds floated past in the sky. Yu Qianqiu silently walked to the white jade railing. He looked at the flowing lights in the distance with a serious expression. After a long silence, Yun Peng, who was at the side, tilted his head and looked at him in surprise. He thought to himself, "This fellow has always been running around without stopping. Why is he in the mood to come here and look at the scenery today?" The cool breeze blew gently. Time passed bit by bit. Yun Peng, who had always liked peace, could not help but look into the distance and asked, "I heard from the great bright wheel that you were chased out of the paradise wonderland?" "Yes, I was almost killed. What a great humiliation." Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "But it doesn't matter. There's nothing strange about something like this. But it's impolite not to reciprocate. I will return it to them sooner or later." "Oh," Yun Peng replied nonchalantly. After a moment of silence, he tilted his head to look at him and asked, "Is there something on your mind?" "No, I just came to look at my territory. It wasn't easy to get a foothold here. I'm worried that someone will touch my territory. If that happens, I will be very unhappy." Yu Qianqiu looked ahead and said, "This is the hallucination immortal city. With the immortal palace, who dares to cause trouble in the hallucination immortal city? But I'm still living under someone else's roof. I'm getting a little impatient from waiting." Yu Qianqiu said indifferently and turned to leave. Yun Peng turned back to look at his back and frowned. In a vast swamp that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were several towering mountains connected to each other. One of the mountains in the middle was scorched black. The mountain was full of caves of all sizes. There were stone stairs cut out of the mountain walls that connected the caves to each other. Many people could be seen coming and going on the stone stairs. It was very magnificent. The only drawback of this mountain was that there was almost no green vegetation. On the other hand, the few mountains on the side were lush with houses faintly discernible in the midst of the greenery. There was a suspension bridge between the mountains with iron chains. There were people swaying on it leisurely. A large area of the swamp at the foot of the mountain was like boiling water, constantly bubbling with large and small bubbles. The rising water mist shrouded several mountains that were not too high in the clouds and mist. The 8 adjacent mountains were of different heights. They were arranged like a crescent moon. Those who were familiar with them would know that this was where the Heaven Palace, the #1 alchemy sect in the immortal realm, was located. The scorched black mountain in the middle was the important alchemy ground of the Heaven Palace. The first mountain to the right of the east was the residence of the disciples of the Heaven Palace, who were doing odd jobs. They were all disciples who had not reached the immortal stage. Shui Mingqing walked out of a cave on the Black Mountain. He had just helped Master Yi deliver the immortal herbs needed for alchemy. Master Yi needed a lot of time to refine pills, so he didn't need to accompany him. During the time before Master Yi finished his alchemy, he was free to do as he pleased. After leaving the cave, Shui Mingqing stood on the stone stairs and couldn't help but look at the first mountain on the right. He sighed with emotion. Not long ago, he had been living there like a slave. After a trip to the Divine Ruin Realm, his fate had completely changed. He had actually become an elder's disciple, so he had finally moved out of that messy, crowded place where people could beat and scold him. Now he had his own small courtyard to live in. Although this small courtyard belonged to Master Yi, and he only occupied a room inside, it was better than sleeping in a room with more than a dozen people. The reason for such a big change was all thanks to Yu Qianqiu. Thinking of Yu Qianqiu, he couldn't help but think of how Yu Qianqiu had asked him to steal the pill formulas of the Heaven Palace. Just thinking about it made him shudder. Shui Mingqing tilted his head and looked at the adjacent mountain on the left. It was also the tallest of the 8 mountains. The scripture-seeking pavilion where the pill formulas were stored was on the pavilion at the top of the mountain. Shui Mingqing sighed and shook his head. He definitely couldn't get the pill formulas. Even if he could, he couldn't steal them for Yu Qianqiu. The pill formulas were the foundation of the Heaven Palace. If the foundation of the Heaven Palace was broken, even the Heaven Palace would have no future. So how could he have a future? Without thinking about it, Shui Mingqing flew toward the 3rd mountain on the right and landed at the door of a small courtyard halfway up the mountain. He was about to push the door open and enter when he suddenly found a person standing on the top of a big tree not far to the left. The person's back was facing him, and he didn't know what he was looking at. Shui Mingqing wanted to ask who the person was, but when he saw that the person was wearing the clothes of the sect and standing leisurely with his hands behind his back, he took a closer look and found that he couldn't see through the person's cultivation. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The person who dared to put on airs in front of the elders must be a senior expert of the sect. He was not someone he could provoke. Shui Mingqing pushed the door open and silently entered the courtyard. In the courtyard, he couldn't help but look back. He found that the person's clothes seemed to be a little big, but this was not something he worried about. He entered the room on the left and closed the door. That was his room. After entering the room, Shui Mingqing immediately found that the room seemed to be missing something. His gaze fell on the window sill and found that the golden Buddha he had placed on the window sill had been moved, and the clothes he had casually thrown on the bed were gone. Someone had entered his room. Shui Mingqing glanced around and was slightly shocked. He was worried that someone had also broken into Master Yafa's room. So he quickly opened the door and flashed into the courtyard. Just as he landed at the door of the main room, he heard someone laughing behind him. "Brother Shui, why are you in such a panic?" Shui Mingqing looked back and was shocked. Yu Qianqiu. He saw Yu Qianqiu looking at him with a smile. He was wearing a slightly large gray robe, which was the uniform of the Palace of Heaven. He couldn't help but look at the big tree where there had been someone before. The person on the top of the tree had disappeared. He immediately understood everything. What? Don't you welcome me? Yu Qianqiu asked with a smile. Shui Mingqing quickly looked around, grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm, and quickly pulled him into his room and closed the door. He asked with a terrified expression, "Why are you here?" Chapter 920. Then his expression relaxed, and he answered his own question with sudden realization. "I know. You must be here to discuss the purchase of elixirs with our sect." He found a reason to comfort himself, otherwise, he couldn't figure out how Yu Qianqiu came here. Purchase elixirs? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. "It's enough to be snubbed once. To tell you the truth, I snuck in." Snuck in? Shui Mingqing almost jumped up in shock. He hurriedly opened the door and ran outside to look around. After confirming that there was no one, he hurriedly ran back in and closed the door. He said in fear, "My Chaotian Palace has a mountain protecting formation. If someone trespasses, they will be discovered immediately. How could you break in?" "What a joke." Yu Qianqiu walked to his couch and sat down. He said proudly, "I come and go as I please. Your Chaotian Palace's mountain protecting formation can't stop me." Now that things had come to this, Shui Mingqing no longer cared about how capable he was. Looking at the clothes he was wearing, he flashed over and pulled on his sleeves, saying nervously, "Brother Yu, you're too daring. Since you snuck in, how dare you run around outside in my clothes? No one saw you before, right?" "Of course someone saw me," Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. "What?" Shui Mingqing exclaimed. "Who saw you? Did he recognize you?" He couldn't help but be nervous. Everyone in Chaotian Palace knew that he had a close relationship with Yu Qianqiu. If someone saw Yu Qianqiu here, it would be difficult for him to get rid of the responsibility. "Look at how scared you are." Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "Aren't you the one who saw me?" Shui Mingqing was stunned. He knew that he was joking, and he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. However, just as he heaved a sigh of relief, Yu Qianqiu's next sentence made him jump up in shock. Yu Qianqiu then said in a low voice, "I looked at the terrain of your Chaotian Palace from the outside, and stood there for some time. There were also people coming and going, but I don't know if they noticed me or not. Actually, you don't have to be afraid. There are so many disciples in your Skyward Palace, and I'm wearing your clothes. Who would know who I am?" The moment he said that, Shui Mingqing was shocked again. Yu Qianqiu frowned and waved his hand to stop him. "Stop. I say, why are you so timid? What's there to be afraid of? My client isn't afraid, so what are you afraid of? What's more, I've checked all the rooms in your courtyard. There's no one there at all. You don't have to be afraid of even the air, do you?" He said it casually, but how could Shui Mingqing compare to him? What kind of dangerous things had he not done in his previous life? Sometimes, he specialized in taking risks out of desperation. His courage had long been trained to be incomparably fat and strong. He was a master who could jump on the tip of a knife 3 times fast and 4 times slow. For him, danger was already a common occurrence. Although Shui Mingqing had cultivated for so many years, he had not experienced anything at all. The last trip to the Divine Ruin Realm was already the biggest battle he had seen, and it could be said that he had gained some courage and knowledge. However, compared to his boldness, it was not on the same level at all. There was no comparison. In addition, Shui Mingqing had been oppressed by the despotic power of the Chaotian Palace for many years, so he instinctively trembled with fear here, which could not be compared to outside. Now that Yu Qianqiu had come here to cause trouble, it would be strange if he was not afraid. This was just like how the lords of various countries would be afraid when they heard of the demon ghost region's torture master. "Brother Yu," Shui Mingqing grabbed his arm with both hands and almost begged, "You also know how difficult it was for me to get to where I am today. In the Divine Ruin Realm, all my brothers and sisters died, and I was the only one who managed to escape with my life. Now, I walk on thin ice every day, not daring to have the slightest accident. I really don't want to go back to the past. Brother Yu, I beg you, if you sneak in like this, then sneak out like this. How about this?" Shui Mingqing pointed out the window and said, In the swamp 200 miles northwest of our Chaotian Palace, there are a few scattered islands. Brother, you go out first, and I will find a reason to go out later. We will meet there, and if there is anything we want to say, we can say it there. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly, looked at his arm that was being hugged, and suddenly realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. This Shui Mingqing was a person who could not be helped up. His cowardice was already in his bones. No matter how much support was given, he would not be able to achieve anything in the Chaotian Palace. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. Not to mention that he would not do as he said. Even if he did as he said, how could he go to the scattered islands 200 miles northwest of the Chaotian Palace? He admitted that he did not have the ability to break through the mountain protection formation of the Chaotian Palace. And if he used the golden bead to transfer, he could only return to the Fantasy Immortal City first, and then fly from the Fantasy Immortal City to the scattered islands. What a joke! Let go of your hand. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Shui Mingqing was stunned, and let go of his hand in embarrassment. As soon as he said this, Yu Qianqiu himself felt that his tone was a little too much, so he put on a smile and stood up, patted Shui Mingqing on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "When did I hurt you? Don't worry, since I dare to do this, I naturally have confidence that I will not let you be implicated." As he said this, he walked to the window sill, picked up the golden Buddha statue that he had given to Shui Mingqing, and looked at it. When he put it back, he said casually, "I have looked around the various rooms in the courtyard. It seems that you should live with your master. Your master is very good to you. By the way, when will your master come back?" After being scolded by him, Shui Mingqing suddenly became a lot more well-behaved, and no longer looked like he was going to die. He followed behind him and replied, "He is going to refine a batch of elixirs for the sect, and he will probably be in seclusion for 10 days to half a month." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Then you don't have to worry even more. Come with me." He walked to the door, opened the door and walked out. Shui Mingqing helplessly followed him to the courtyard, but he saw that he flew up to the tree outside the courtyard. "Come up." Yu Qianqiu turned back and waved at him. Shui Mingqing helplessly flashed up to the tree, but he timidly looked around. Yu Qianqiu stared at him, and narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he pointed to a few mountains in the Swamp Kingdom that had a unique charm and asked, "Which mountain is the scripture-seeking pavilion on?" "Ah, be still." After being shocked for a while, Shui Mingqing immediately changed to a voice transmission and asked, "Do you really want to steal the elixir recipe of the Chaotian Palace? Do you think it's possible?" Yu Qianqiu knew that he was worried, and also changed to a voice transmission to communicate. "I just came to your Chaotian Palace to take a look. The matter of the elixir recipe is already in the past, so don't mention it again. Your Chaotian Palace is really interesting to actually have a foothold in this swamp. It must be because of the underground fire below." Shui Mingqing was skeptical of his words, but he still pointed to the tallest of the 8 mountains and sighed. The pavilion on the tallest mountain is the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion. The Scripture-Seeking Pavilion is divided into 2 pavilions, east and west, with a total of 5 floors. The East Pavilion has elixir recipes, and the West Pavilion is the collection of cultivation methods in the sect. Each floor is guarded by an expert in the sect, and only those who meet the corresponding conditions can enter the corresponding floor. If you want to read the elixir recipe, you must first get the permission of your master, accompanied by his master as a guarantee, before you can enter to read, and you can only read one type at a time. The reason why he was so detailed was that he was more or less afraid that Yu Qianqiu still had the idea of getting lucky. So he let him know how powerful it was to dispel that idea. "Oh, this rule is really strange. Wouldn't it be more comfortable for the master to directly teach? Why would there be so many rules and make it so troublesome?" Yu Qianqiu countered with a question. Could it be that there's some kind of explanation behind this? Of course. Shui Mingqing didn't know what to do with him, so he could only explain. Having the master as a guarantee is to ensure that the supervision is in place, and at the same time, for the sake of seriousness and for the safety of the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion. Letting the disciples go to the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion to choose their own elixir recipes to refer to, instead of forcing them to cultivate, is to bring out the strengths of the disciples. Alchemy is more or less about talent, and everyone can make elixirs, but the probability of success is very different. If there is no rule and everyone tries to make elixirs at will, with so many disciples in the Chaotian Palace, the consumption of immortal herbs alone will not be able to bear. Only one kind of elixir recipe is allowed to be cultivated at a time, more or less for this reason, and the elixir recipe this time must also reach a certain success standard before they have the chance to continue to cultivate the next elixir recipe. Yu Qianqiu nodded to show that he understood. Seeing that Shui Mingqing had been worried about the flowing light that passed by from time to time in the sky, he said very considerately, "You should go back, in case someone finds out and implicates you." "What about you?" Shui Mingqing asked nervously. Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly and said, "It's rare for me to come to the Chaotian Palace, so I'll walk around." Shui Mingqing was immediately speechless. However, Yu Qianqiu flashed back to the courtyard and went into the house. Shui Mingqing followed him in, and saw that Yu Qianqiu took out a human skin mask and stuck it on his face. After carefully fiddling with it for a while, he turned into a living person, which stunned Shui Mingqing. Nowadays, there was still someone who used such an old-fashioned method? Yu Qianqiu took a mirror and looked at himself left and right. After finding that there were no flaws, he put away the mirror and touched his face. He chuckled with satisfaction and said, "I Niu Yid am back again. Brother Shui, what do you think?" Shui Mingqing was speechless and stunned for a while, then said nervously, "Brother Yu, what do you want to do? Do you still want to get the elixir formula?" "I've already said that I'm going to walk around the Chaotian Palace. I just changed my appearance because I don't want to implicate you." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "I'll go out for a walk first and come back later." "Ah, you still want to come back?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had already walked out of the door, Shui Mingqing immediately chased after him and shouted, Brother Yu, where are you going?" He chased him all the way out of the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu said unhurriedly as he walked, "Don't follow me anymore. If you continue to follow me, it'll be hard for you not to be implicated. Don't worry. I Niu Yid, never get into trouble when I go around." Shui Mingqing did not dare to chase him anymore. Looking at Yu Qianqiu walking away along the mountain steps in the forest, his expression kept twitching. He never thought that the Chaotian Palace, which was as majestic as a mountain in his heart, and had to be careful, was like a leisurely garden in the eyes of Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 921. As he walked up the stairs, Yu Qianqiu seemed to be leisurely, but in fact, he was tense on the inside and relaxed on the outside. He did not dare to slack off. He understood that this was the lair of Chaotian Palace, and it was also a place where there were many masters. The more nervous he appeared, the easier it was to arouse suspicion. Along the way, he met many disciples of Chaotian Palace, and he always held his head high, like this was his home. Those disciples did not know him, and they could not see through his cultivation, so they all stood on the side of the road and made way for him. The forest was as dark as ink, and the thin mist rising from the swamp filled the forest, making the air extremely humid. Yu Qianqiu went around to the back of the mountain, and after getting out of Shui Mingqing's sight, he looked around, threw a small silver ball into the forest grass, and then slowly flew to the highest of the 8 mountains. The sutra-seeking pavilion at the top of the mountain was like a large dark monster, lying there, giving people a gloomy feeling. There were people flying around the mountain, and there were people coming in and out of the sutra-seeking pavilion. No one cared about the arrival of Yu Qianqiu. When he landed outside the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu found that the entire sutra-seeking pavilion was actually made of meteoric iron. Meteoric iron was a common material in the celestial realm to make ordinary magic tools. He did not expect that Chaotian Palace would use it to build the sutra-seeking pavilion. As Shui Mingqing said, the sutra-seeking pavilion had a total of 5 floors. The eaves on all sides were like towers, and the layers were like sealed boxes. On one side of each floor, there were 2 round windows that looked like the eyes of a monster, which were also sealed with fine fences. People came and went from the sutra-seeking pavilion. Yu Qianqiu walked around the sutra-seeking pavilion. When he passed the gate, he found that there was another floor under the sutra-seeking pavilion, which was similar to a basement. There should be 6 floors in the sutra-seeking pavilion. There must be people guarding below, which immediately extinguished his hope of escaping underground. The most helpless thing was that he found that there was no way to get close to the sutra-seeking pavilion. There were people sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed in the 4 corners of the pavilion. Yu Qianqiu could not see through their cultivation. Although their eyes were closed, Yu Qianqiu believed that as long as he got close, they would be able to detect him. Yu Qianqiu was eager to know the structure inside. If he couldn't even figure out the situation inside, how could he start? After making another round, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to stay any longer. It seemed like he was the only one wandering around outside, and it would be hard not to attract suspicion if he stayed for too long. He followed the stone steps down the mountain. When he was halfway up the mountain, he saw the mist floating in front of him. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he had an idea. Walking quickly to the dense forest, he quickly flashed into the depths of the dense forest on the mountainside, found a secret place, and directly burrowed into the ground. Not long after, he saw that the ground began to emit a thick fog, gradually spreading and blending into the thin fog of the mountain. It's broad daylight, why is the fog so thick? The temperature of the earth fire has probably risen. The temperature of the fire is high and low, so it is estimated that a lot of defective pills will be produced. Those novice alchemists are probably out of luck, and it is inevitable that they will be punished. 2 disciples of the Skyward Palace, who walked out of the sutra-seeking pavilion against the thick fog, looked at each other, smiled, and left quickly, quite gloating. In the Skyward Palace, the phenomenon of thick fog lingering around was very normal, and it had a lot to do with the location of the Skyward Palace. Everyone had long been accustomed to it. After the thin fog slowly invaded the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding underground in the dense forest, was overjoyed. Wherever the thin fog went, the layout of the sutra-seeking pavilion gradually appeared in his mind. The east and west pavilions of the sutra-seeking pavilion were divided by the main entrance and stairs. In the west pavilion, there were obviously more people reading cultivation methods than in the east pavilion. The doors of the east and west pavilions on each floor were opposite each other, and there was a small room in the concave between the 2 pavilions, where there was a master sitting. At the door of the east pavilion on each floor, there were some people guarding outside the door to keep an eye on the disciples inside. This was probably what Shui Mingqing had said, the masters who supervised the disciples to choose the pill recipes. However, the higher the level, the fewer people there were. There was almost no one in the east pavilion on the 4th floor, and the east pavilion on the 5th floor was empty. Even the situation in the west pavilion was similar. Obviously, the higher the level of things, the fewer people could come into contact with it. After getting a general idea of the layout of the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu withdrew his perception. He did not dare to let his perception explore unscrupulously inside, for fear of being discovered. Although he had a general idea of the situation, what made Yu Qianqiu depressed was how to enter the sutra-seeking pavilion. After hiding underground and frowning for a while, a bitter smile flashed in his eyes. He cut one of his fingers and forced out 2 drops of blood. Suddenly, a red fog appeared from the thick fog rising from the depths of the forest. As the fog spread, it gradually thinned and eventually disappeared without a trace in the vast sea of fog. It was so fine that it was hard to see with the naked eye. After drifting for a while, the red fog split into 2 and surged silently through the windows of the east and west pavilions on the top floor of the sutra-seeking pavilion. Bit by bit, they gradually gathered in a corner. In the end, a small dot of red was left in an inconspicuous corner of the east and west pavilions. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He rubbed his hands together excitedly and disappeared underground. When he reappeared, he was in the meeting room of Utopia's military camp. The door to the meeting room was tightly shut. Zhang Peng was the only one standing guard inside, and there was a pile of jade archives on the table. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, Zhang Peng stood up and bowed. "Master." Yu Qianqiu swept his gaze across the table and asked, "Is everything ready?" Zhang Peng solemnly replied, "Everything is ready. After writing it down in the jade archives, should I give the pill formula to Chief Chen?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and gave an irrelevant answer. "How are the people I asked you to keep an eye on?" Chief Preceptor Guan is very calm, but Chief Chen's mood and condition seem to be worsening. Right. That woman made her son acknowledge Master's wife as his godmother. Both mother and son spend most of their time with Master's wife. It seems like they're on good terms with her, Zhang Peng reported. "I hope they won't do anything that I have no choice but to do. Continue keeping an eye on them." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the jade archives on the table. He pointed at them and said, "Other than you, don't let anyone else know about this, including your master's wife. As for the immortal herb garden, send someone to keep an eye on it. You should understand what I mean." "Understood." Zhang Peng cupped his fists with a serious expression. Yu Qianqiu nodded and disappeared from the meeting room. In the eastern pavilion of the scripture-seeking pavilion in Skyward Palace, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared and floated in the room. He did not dare to move around, afraid that he would be discovered if he made any noise. He looked around and immediately pressed his hand against his chest in relief. Perhaps it was because no one had come to the 5th floor yet. The door was tightly shut. Even if someone were to pass by, they would not be able to see him. This gave him a sense of security. Inside the room, there were many jade archives hanging on silk threads. He estimated that there were more than 100 of them. They were clearly the jade archives for pill formulas. Without any hesitation, Yu Qianqiu started from the corner of the room. He inserted his divine sense into one of the jade archives and saw that it was indeed a pill formula. Unfortunately, these jade archives for pill formulas could neither be copied nor stolen. However, he was prepared for this. Without another word, he took out a jade archive and repeated it as he recorded. He then transmitted his voice directly to Zhang Peng, who was in the meeting room in Utopia's military camp. The reason why he wanted the two of them to record it together was mainly because he was afraid that they would make a mistake if they were pressed for time. He still had to compare the contents of the jade archives after they were done. This way he could be more certain. Meanwhile, Zhang Peng, who was in Utopia, focused his attention and started writing rapidly on the blank jade archives. The two of them worked together at lightning speed. Yu Qianqiu swept through the rows of jade archives. In just a few hours, he had stolen the contents of nearly 100 jade archives for pill formulas from the entire Eastern Pavilion on the 5th floor. After he was done, the sky outside gradually darkened. Yu Qianqiu reached out and gently pressed his hand against the meteoric metal wall. He quietly sensed the movements in the entire scripture-seeking pavilion and realized that the number of people downstairs was gradually decreasing. He checked the color of the sky outside through the window and decided to hide there until it turned dark. As he expected, once the sky turned dark, the people on the lower floors gradually left. Not long after, the doors of the eastern and western pavilions on the lower floors began to close one after another. This was exactly what he wanted. He directly fell upside down, his head piercing through the meteoric metal floor and appearing on the ceiling of the 4th floor. He had a panoramic view of the situation in the rooms on the 4th floor. Seeing that there was no one else around, he emerged from the ceiling and quietly floated in the air. The number of jade archives hanging in the rooms on the 4th floor was double that of the ones on the 5th floor. Time was precious. Yu Qianqiu immediately made use of the time to repeat the jade archives one by one. After spending a few hours quickly clearing the 4th floor, he used the same method to enter the 3rd floor. In the end, he discovered that the number of jade archives on the 3rd floor was another 100 or so more than on the 4th floor. Hence, he immediately started copying them. By the time he was done with the 3rd floor, the sky was already beginning to brighten. Taking advantage of the fact that no one had arrived yet, he went back to the 2nd floor and continued. He managed to get close to 200 jade archives. When he heard someone coming up to the 2nd floor, He immediately memorized the location of the Jade Archive that he had yet to finish and quickly disappeared. He did not escape. Instead, he appeared in the Western Pavilion on the 5th floor and began to steal the cultivation manuals from Skyward Palace. After he was done with the cultivation manuals in the Western Pavilion on the 5th floor, he discovered that there were already 2 people in the 4th floor. Hence, he gave up on the idea of continuing and prepared to continue at night. After returning to Utopia's conference room, the master and disciple listed the items they had stolen on the floors. Each of them took half of the items and started comparing them to see if there were any areas that they could not match up. In the end, after checking, they found that there were indeed areas that did not match up due to their speed. However, it did not matter. The 2 of them picked out the areas that did not match up and prepared to go back and check the originals to make changes. After the sky turned dark, Yu Qianqiu snuck back to the 2nd floor of the Eastern Pavilion and continued what he had not finished. After he was done with the 2nd floor, he continued on to the 1st floor. As there were too many pill recipes in the basket on the 1st floor, he spent the entire night, but was still unable to finish them. He only came back the next night and spent another half of the night before he was finally done with all the pill recipes in the entire Eastern Pavilion. The cultivation manuals in the few floors of the Western Pavilion were much fewer compared to the pill recipes. However, on the other hand, the contents of the cultivation manuals were many times more than the contents of the pill recipes. For the sake of the items in the Western Pavilion, Yu Qianqiu worked for a total of 5 nights. The master and disciple stole at night and quickly checked the items during the day. In the end, they discovered that there were close to 100 mistakes. Hence, Yu Qianqiu spent a lot of time running back to check them. In the end, after calculating the time, it took him exactly 10 days to finally get his hands on the items that Skyward Palace had accumulated over the years. Chapter 922. What a pity. I can't get my hands on the sect leader of Skyward Palace. Those are the real treasures. Yu Qianqiu sighed as he looked at Zhang Peng, who was sorting through the Jade Archives. Under his orders, Zhang Peng was cataloging the names and effects of all the pills, so that it would be easier to find them in the future. After sorting through the cultivation methods, Zhang Peng became more and more excited. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Master, are these all cultivation methods from the immortal realm?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a He didn't care much for these cultivation methods that required tens of thousands of years to be effective. After a pause, he said, "After sorting through the items, make a copy of the cultivation methods and keep it. When the time comes, see if there are any suitable ones for everyone to cultivate. But I warn you, it's not necessarily a good thing to practice too many miscellaneous things. Often when a cultivation method is mastered to the extreme, it will naturally be comprehended by analogy. That is the true power of a cultivation method. The reason why I brought these things here is to give everyone in the army more opportunities to choose. I hope that they will be able to choose the cultivation method that suits them and strive for perfection so that they can unleash greater power. That is what I want. I don't want everyone to just keep everything to themselves." Zhang Peng nodded in agreement. Yu Qianqiu put on the airs of a master, then gave a few more instructions and left. During these 10 days, Shui Mingqing was unable to eat or sleep. Yu Qianqiu had gone out for 10 days, but he still hadn't returned. After wandering around Skyward Palace for such a long time, Shui Mingqing's scalp went numb at the thought of it. How could there be such a crazy person? He was worried that something had happened to Yu Qianqiu, but more importantly, he was worried that he would be implicated. After waiting for 10 days and still not seeing Yu Qianqiu return, he had already come to the conclusion that Yu Qianqiu had either left, been killed, or been captured. However, there had been no movement from Skyward Palace during this time, so the possibility of the former was higher. What worried him was that Yu Qianqiu should have told him before leaving. Thus, he thought too much and scared himself. He wandered around in his room like a headless fly, and often went outside the courtyard to look around. Today, after wandering outside for a long time, As soon as he returned to his room, he saw a smiling Yu Qianqiu sitting on his bed. Shui Mingqing was startled for a moment before he exclaimed, "You're finally back. You've always been in our sect." "Hee. How could I stroll around for so long? I went back for a while." Yu Qianqiu jumped down from the couch and said with a smile, "I forgot to tell you before I left. I was afraid that you would be worried, so I came back to see you again. This might be the last time. I might not have the chance to disturb you again." Shui Mingqing was speechless when he heard this. Could it be that the mountain-protecting formation of the Skyward Palace was just a decoration, and outsiders could come in whenever they wanted? This loophole was way too big. However, when he thought about it, he felt that something was amiss. He could not help but ask suspiciously, "There are 2 celestial provinces between the illusory immortal city and the Heaven Palace. It has only been 10 days, and you have already come back and forth? Could it be that Brother Yu has never left the Heaven Palace?" He thought about it and compared it in his heart. Even with his master's cultivation, it was impossible for him to come back so quickly, let alone Yu Qianqiu. "Hee. To be honest, the secret of me coming back so quickly is over there." Yu Qianqiu pointed to the golden Buddha on the windowsill and explained with a smile, "This golden statue actually has a teleportation formation that I set up. It was only a blink of an eye for me to come here from the illusory immortal city. This is also the reason why I had to give you this golden statue back then. At first, it was to make it convenient for me to steal the pill formula from the Heaven Palace. Now that it seems that there is no hope, I will leave it here so that I can visit you at any time in the future." Teleportation formation. Shui Mingqing looked at the golden statue in confusion because he had never heard of such a thing. Actually, it's similar to a communication formation. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained the concept of the teleportation formation, causing Shui Mingqing to be dumbfounded. It turned out that there were teleportation coordinates in his room. It was no wonder that the other party could come and go as he pleased. The Heaven Palace's mountain protection formation could not do anything to him. "All right. I came back to tell you about this. I still have some matters to attend to at the World Trade Association, so I'll head back first." Yu Qianqiu pointed at the golden Buddha and said with a smile, "Don't break this thing. Once it's broken, I won't be able to visit you next time." With that, he waved goodbye and disappeared from the room. Actually, he did not return to the World Trade Association. Instead, he stood on a mountain peak in Utopia. His clothes fluttered in the wind. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance coldly and stood quietly alone on the mountain peak. Then he slowly closed his eyes. Teleportation formation. Shui Mingqing looked at the tightly shut doors and windows. If he had teleported away, there must be a space that allowed him to leave. However, the doors and windows were tightly shut, and Yu Qianqiu had disappeared into thin air just like that. This forced him to believe Yu Qianqiu's words. After being stupefied for a while, the expression on his face became a bit angry. Then he rushed to the window and grabbed the golden statue with both hands, wanting to destroy it. However, he felt a bit of fear towards Yu Qianqiu, so he didn't dare to do anything. "This time, Master is not here. If you come again and Master finds out, I won't be able to explain myself even if I have mouths all over my body." Shui Mingqing found an excuse for himself, but he could not make up his mind and could not do it for a long time. After pondering for a while, his furrowed brows relaxed. He looked at the golden statue in his hands and said, "Brother Yu, I didn't destroy this. It was accidentally destroyed by my master. I believe you won't blame me for this, right?" He had finally found a reason to report to Yu Qianqiu in the future. He exerted force with both hands, and with an ear-piercing sound of metal grinding against each other, a lifelike golden Buddha turned into a golden fried dough twist in his hands. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing alone on the mountain peak, suddenly opened his eyes. Black flames flashed in his eyes, and a black fire broadsword appeared in his hands. As he swung it horizontally, he disappeared from the mountain peak. Shui Mingqing, who was twisting the golden Buddha into a twist, suddenly felt a chill on his neck. He suddenly reacted and wanted to turn his head to look, but he realized that he could not move his neck at all. He only saw that there was a black broadsword under his neck, and then he found that his eyelids were a little heavy. The scene in front of him changed, and his neck finally turned around. He saw the person that he did not want to see the most at this moment. Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu held the broadsword with both hands, and stared indifferently at the human head on the broadsword. He said, "Brother Shui, I have personally come to send you off. After all, we are friends, and I did not want to make a move on you. I have already given you a chance. I just told you not to destroy this golden statue. This is your last chance, and it can also be said to be a test. But you just had to go against me. Do you know who I hate the most now? I hate ingrates the most. I personally helped that ingrate moving up, and I do not want to help another ingrate who goes against me. Since I have the ability to help you up, I also have the ability to kill you with my own hands. Brother Shui, have a safe journey." He flipped the broadsword and put it into his sleeve. Shui Mingqing's head fell to the ground. He died with his eyes wide open, full of disbelief. Yu Qianqiu walked to the headless corpse that was still standing there, and took away the golden Buddha in its hand. The headless corpse suddenly lost its balance and fell to the ground with a bang. Yu Qianqiu's expression was abnormally calm, but his 5 fingers that were holding the golden Buddha had sunk deep into it. The golden Buddha gradually shrank into his palm, and he disappeared from the room. There was a headless corpse on the floor of the room. At this moment, the guard of the inscription room in the Palace of Heaven suddenly discovered that Shui Mingqing's nameplate had exploded. He immediately turned around and shouted, "Something has happened to Master Ya's disciple, Shui Mingqing. Immediately go to Master Ya's place and see what is going on." 2 figures turned into streams of light and flew away quickly. Not long after, when a stream of light returned, the Palace of Heaven immediately sent out a warning. What a joke! In the core of the Palace of Heaven, someone had been inexplicably killed. Moreover, it was the disciple of an elder. Such a thing could not be tolerated. With an order from the Palace of Heaven, countless streams of light flew out from several mountains and quickly searched inside and outside for the murderer. Master Ya, who was refining pills, was also alarmed. He had to stop refining pills and quickly went to his courtyard. When he went to Shui Mingqing's room and saw Shui Mingqing's decapitated body, his old face suddenly turned livid. Although it was a pity for this dead disciple, the murderer dared to kill his disciple in his courtyard. It was clear that he was slapping his face and not giving him any face. Master Ya's first reaction was that someone was jealous that he had accepted a good disciple with a long face, so they took advantage of his absence to secretly kill him. He didn't think that it was an outsider who did it, because it was not easy for outsiders to break into the Palace of Heaven. If an outsider had the ability to break into the Palace of Heaven, why would he kill a little disciple in the soul formation stage? After Master Ya had been in contact with Shui Mingqing for a period of time, he had more or less understood Shui Mingqing. This disciple would not make enemies with anyone in the Palace of Heaven. Even after he followed him, he was humble and respectful to others, never putting on airs. But it was such a person that someone actually dared to kill him. If this wasn't for himself, then who is it for? Master Ya immediately flew into a rage. With a bang, he directly broke through the roof and floated in the air. He looked around and shouted angrily, "Who did it? Get the hell out!" His angry roar echoed in the air, but the chances of finding the murderer were too slim. On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu routinely came to the door of Bai Suzhen's cultivation room to take a look. Wei Chuanxia was still sitting cross-legged at the door with her eyes closed. She slightly opened her eyes to look at Yu Qianqiu, and found that Yu Qianqiu looked dispirited. She couldn't help but stare in amazement. "What have you been doing recently? How did you end up like this?" He had used his divine sense almost non-stop for 10 days in a row, and he had just ruthlessly killed one of his own people. His spirit was indeed very tired. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. "Nothing, I'm going to rest." He left Wei Chuanxiu, who was fuming with anger, and walked away. Chapter 923. The conference room in Utopia's military camp was filled with a messy fragrance. 3 piles of immortal herbs that Zhang Peng had prepared were placed on the table. The immortal herbs that Yu Qianqiu had asked him to prepare for refining the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, Marrow Cleansing Pill, and Immortal Ascension Pill were all ready. Yu Qianqiu stood to the side and compared the 3 piles of immortal herbs with the pill formula Jade Archive. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he cradled the pill formula Jade Archive and memorized the refining methods for the 3 immortal pills. Only after he had memorized them did he put away the Jade Archive. Looking at the 3 piles of immortal herbs on the table, Yu Qianqiu silently demonstrated the refining process in his mind. After confirming that he was confident, he heaved a sigh of relief. Master was going to start refining the pills. Zhang Peng's face was filled with excitement. He had long heard from Guan Yu that his master's pill refining skills had already reached an extraordinary level. Even Utopia's #1 pill refining expert, Chen Feng, had said that compared to his master in the field of pill refining, it was like comparing a grain of rice to a bright moon. It was a pity that he had never seen it before. He didn't expect to see it with his own eyes today. Just as Zhang Peng subconsciously stepped back to make room, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand with a calm expression. The wind from his palm swept up close to 20 immortal herbs on the table. At the same time, light green flames shot out from Yu Qianqiu's palm like a tornado, separating the 20 immortal herbs into 3 piles in the air. Nearly 20 stalks of immortal grass melted into a paste at a visible speed, squirming together. Suddenly, the faint green flame spun even faster, and the paste wrapped within it turned into a series of afterimages, spinning at high speed. Refining 3 immortal pills at the same time. Oh my god! Zhang Peng was dumbfounded. He had been in Utopia for a long time, and had interacted with Chen Feng for a long time. He knew a little about pill refining, but this was the first time he had seen such a method of refining pills without using a furnace. 1 palm of fire controlled the refinement of 3 immortal pills, and close to 20 immortal herbs. There was no need to elaborate on the complicated changes. Zhang Peng finally understood what it meant to be at the pinnacle of perfection. It would not be an exaggeration to describe his master's ability to control fire as extraordinary. Suddenly, the swirling flames began to release waves of gray mist. Zhang Peng knew that this was the essence left behind after the impurities within the immortal herbs were removed. As the impurities were removed, the swirling shadows inside gradually brightened, turning into colorful ribbons that danced in the air. As the impurities were removed, the colors became brighter and brighter, like shooting stars dancing in the sky. When there were no more impurities being expelled, the light green flame suddenly stopped spinning. Almost 20 glittering and resplendent liquid beads of different colors were like stars hanging in the night sky, slowly spinning according to the remaining inertia. After it stopped floating in the air, it seemed to be even more beautiful than the brightest gems. It was clear, bright, colorful, and beautiful in an instant. Zhang Peng slowly exhaled. He had been holding his breath since the beginning, not even daring to breathe loudly. Just as he let out a sigh of relief, the nearly 20 colorful liquid crystal beads suddenly collided with each other and killed each other. Such a beautiful thing was destroyed, and Zhang Peng felt a little heartache. The liquid beads continuously collided, fused, and separated. The light green flame was like an executioner adding fuel to the fire, constantly stirring them up. By the time the light green flame began to rotate in a regular pattern, there were only 18 of the nearly 20 clusters of liquid crystal beads left in the upper, middle, and lower layers. Their shapes were similar to amber, and they were very beautiful. There were 3, 6, and 9 beads respectively. The top 3 beads were golden and as big as fists. The middle 6 beads were the size of chicken eggs, and the bottom 9 beads were the size of chicken eggs. The 3, 6, and 9 beads were arranged in a pyramid formation. Zhang Peng had personally picked out the immortal herbs according to the pill recipe. He could roughly make out what they were. The 3 golden ones were immortal ascension pills, the 6 brown ones were marrow cleansing pills, and the 9 black ones were restriction breaking pills. Just as he was counting, the 18 beads of liquid beads began to roll up and down like waves. Zhang Peng understood that this was the final baking stage. Normally, when a pill was refined to this stage, it would be a foregone conclusion. Most pills would not be wasted. The color of the light green flame gradually deepened. Yu Qianqiu slightly increased the temperature of the fire, and the 18 beads of liquid beads gradually shrank until they were the size of quail eggs. Then, the roasting flame spun rapidly, and 18 three-colored immortal pills immediately popped out. Zhang Peng stretched out his hands and directly sucked the 18 immortal pills into his palms. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fingers, and the green flame was completely absorbed into his body. A refreshing fragrance began to emit from Zhang Peng's hands. Just taking a few more sniffs would make one feel refreshed. Wow, this is my first time refining. There isn't even a single waste pill. No wonder they said that master's alchemy skills are extraordinary. Zhang Peng looked at the 18 scorching hot immortal pills in his hands and was secretly speechless. He looked up at Yu Qianqiu and said enviously, "Master, I heard that you once held 10 layers in each hand and refined 20 cauldrons of pills at the same time in Ethereal Palace. Is that true?" 20 cauldrons? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He recalled that he had indeed done that in Ethereal Palace. Looking at the immortal pills in Zhang Peng's hands, Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I did do that when I was in the early stage of tribulation passing. But now," he smiled but did not say anything. He felt that there was nothing to brag about in front of his disciple. Back then, when he refined 20 cauldrons with both hands, his cultivation was only in the early stage of tribulation passing. Now that he was the strongest expert in the world in the late stage of soul formation, the difference between his cultivation and that of the past was like heaven and earth. If he were to use his full strength, he wouldn't dare to say that he could refine 100 cauldrons at the same time. Zhang Peng's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely guessed the hidden meaning behind Yu Qianqiu's words. He immediately begged with a bitter face, "Master, why don't you teach me your alchemy skills?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He remembered that apart from passing the good Yuan sword technique to them, he really did not care about them anymore. He had been busy with other things. But if he wanted to teach them the alchemy skills, he must first teach them the Starflame Fire technique. But this technique could easily cause a big fuss. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianqiu put away the immortal pills in Zhang Peng's hands and said in a low voice, "Alchemy has no benefits when fighting enemies. How about this? 100 kilometers to the east, I'll wait for you there. I'll teach you a great technique." With that said, he disappeared from the house. Zhang Peng's mouth was agape. He didn't expect that his master would teach him a great technique, just because he said it casually. On second thought, he felt a little ashamed. His master was busy with important matters, but he said something like that. He really shouldn't have said that. Thinking about it, he was still extremely excited, and he dashed outside. After dashing out of Utopia's military camp, he immediately flew east. When he arrived 100 kilometers to the east, he realized that there were 2 people waiting for him. When he landed, he realized that his senior brother Hong Qi was also there. At that moment, Hong Qi was already a stalwart man. He had a dignified appearance, and coupled with the fact that he had been in charge of the Hong gang for many years, he more or less exuded the aura of a leader. However, as Yu Qianqiu was standing at the side, he didn't dare to show any aura. His master was the #1 expert in the world. Therefore, he obediently hid at the side. "Hee. Junior brother, you're here." Hong Qi smiled wretchedly. Although he was much older than Zhang Peng, there was nothing he could do about it. He had entered the sect earlier than Zhang Peng. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He couldn't stand how smug he was after taking advantage of Zhang Peng, so he immediately kicked his butt. Hong Qi's smirk instantly froze, and he obediently stood at the side with an awkward expression, not daring to even fart. Zhang Peng didn't take the opportunity to kick him while he was down. He still cupped his hands and greeted, "Senior brother." Then, he stood beside Hong Qi and waited for his master's instructions. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance calmly and said, "Today, Zhang Peng mentioned imparting techniques. After some thought, I also feel that I should impart some things to you." As he said this, his expression became serious. He looked at the 2 of them and said with a serious expression, "I have the 5 elements grand techniques of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Each of these techniques has extraordinary effects. I wish to impart them to the two of you. Are the two of you willing to cultivate them? Although he himself hadn't mastered the 5 elements grand techniques, he felt that as a master, he should act like a master. Therefore, he put on the airs of a master. However, he felt that it was a little strange to speak like this. 5 elements grand techniques? The two of them looked at each other and immediately revealed expressions of wild joy. They knelt in front of Yu Qianqiu and kowtowed excitedly. Disciple is willing to cultivate it. I have some ugly words to say first. Yu Qianqiu stared at the two of them coldly and snorted. This 5 elements grand techniques is not ordinary. It is not allowed to be spread outside. Remember this. In the future, whether you teach disciples or pass it on to your own descendants, this technique can only be passed on to one person. If you dare to violate this, don't blame me for taking your lives. Do you understand? Disciple understands master's teachings. The two of them kowtowed again. Get up. After Yu Qianqiu called the two of them up, he didn't say anything else. He pointed his hand forward, and the ground immediately shook violently. The two of them's expressions changed slightly. They saw that not far away from them, a hill that was nearly 100 meters tall had risen. The two of them were immediately stunned. Who has a flying sword? Yu Qianqiu asked. The two of them immediately woke up. Although they didn't know what their master was going to do, they both took out a flying sword. The two of them saw their master wave his sleeve, and immediately felt the weight in their hands lighten. In front of their eyes, silver dust floated with the wind, and the flying sword disappeared. Both of them had silently turned into silver dust. The two of them felt as if they were struck by lightning. Their hearts were extremely shocked. The two of them knew that their master's cultivation was high, but they didn't expect it to be so high. With a flick of his finger, a mountain could rise from the ground, and with a wave of his hand, metal could be turned into dust. His methods were so magical that it was indescribable. It was really too frightening, and had already exceeded their imagination. The two of them looked at Yu Qianqiu with cold eyes. They were trembling with fear. They didn't expect their master to be so strong. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.